Racist cops harass innocent black teen for no reason, unaware his uncle is the U.S. Attorney General. The humid Louisiana air hung thick and heavy, smelling of jasmine and distant rain. Crickets chirped their evening chorus, a deceptively peaceful soundtrack to the simmering tensions in Cypress Pointe. Ancient oaks, draped with Spanish moss, lined the streets of the upscale neighborhood, casting long, eerie shadows that danced with the flickering gas lamps. Robert, a slender 15-year-old, walked with his backpack slung over his shoulder, his earbuds playing a mellow jazz track. He wasn't from around here. Not really. He lived on the other side of the tracks, in the weathered Creole cottages where generations of his family had scraped by. But his grandmother, Lily Elowen, worked as a housekeeper in this part of town, and tonight, he was helping her carry groceries. The houses here were monuments to old money, grand antebellum mansions with manicured lawns and wrought iron gates. They were beautiful, in a cold, untouchable kind of way. Robert felt a pang of longing, a yearning for a life that felt secure, where opportunity wasn't a constant uphill battle. He quickly pushed the thought away. Envy was a dangerous emotion. Robert clutched a thick paper bag filled with cans of beans and flour, a heavy anchor in his youthful steps. He thought Lily would be glad to have the supplies so he could make some gumbo. He was almost at the bus stop when he noticed the patrol car idling at the corner. The headlights seemed to bore into him, and a prickle of unease ran down his spine. He'd seen those cops before, Officers Jason and Broussard. They had a reputation, especially in his neighborhood. He walked faster, hoping to avoid their attention. The jazz in his ears seemed to fade, replaced by the thumping of his heart. He knew the rules: keep your head down, don't make eye contact, and don't give them any reason. He had to get back to Lily's house. Maybe watch some TV until the last bus came. But tonight, fate had other plans. The patrol car's engine revved, and the headlights intensified, blinding him momentarily. A deep voice boomed from the car's loudspeaker. "Hey, you! Stop right there!" Robert froze, his heart hammering against his ribs. He looked around, confused, as if hoping the order was meant for someone else. But there was no one else. It was just him, and the two cops, and the long, dark shadows of Cypress Pointe. He felt a knot of dread tighten in his stomach. He knew this wasn't going to be good. He knew those cops didn't like his kind, walking around in their neighborhood. But he hadn't done anything wrong. He was just trying to get home. He swallowed hard, a bitter taste rising in his throat. This was it. Officer Jason, a burly man with a shaved head and a permanent scowl, stepped out of the car, his hand resting on his holstered weapon. Officer Broussard, younger and seemingly less hardened, lingered by the driver's side door, his expression unreadable. "What's your name, boy?" Jason barked, his voice laced with thinly veiled contempt. Robert hesitated, then spoke clearly. "Robert, sir. Robert Dubois." "What are you doing in this neighborhood, Robert Dubois?" Jason's tone suggested he already knew the answer, and that it wouldn't be good enough. "Just walking to the bus stop, sir. I was helping my grandmother." "Helping your grandmother? Doing what?" Jason took a step closer, invading Robert's personal space. "Carrying groceries, sir. She works around here." "Works, huh? Doing what? Stealing silverware?" Jason chuckled, and Broussard snickered along. Robert's jaw tightened. "She's a housekeeper, sir. She's worked for the Thibodeau family for 20 years. "Thibodeau, huh? I'll bet they don't know what you're really up to." Jason sneered. "Let's see what you got in that bag." He reached for the groceries, but Robert instinctively pulled away. "It's just groceries, sir. I haven't done anything wrong." Jason's face darkened. "Don't you dare pull away from me, boy. You got something to hide?" He grabbed Robert's arm, his grip like a vice. "I said let me see that bag." "He hasn't done anything, Ben," Broussard interjected, his voice hesitant. Jason shot him a withering look. "Stay out of this, Trevor." "But Ben, he's just a kid," Broussard protested, his discomfort growing. "He's not causing any trouble." Jason ignored him, focusing his attention back on Robert. Open the bag, he ordered, his voice low and menacing. Robert, his heart pounding, slowly opened the bag, revealing the cans of beans and the sack of flour. Jason rummaged through the contents, his expression one of disdain. Beans and flour? That's it. What are you planning to cook up, a batch of crack cocaine? Broussard shifted uneasily. Come on, Ben, this is ridiculous. Let him go. Jason glared at him, his eyes blazing. You questioning me, Trevor? You got a problem with how I do my job? Broussard hesitated, then looked away. No, sir. Jason turned back to Robert, his face inches from Robert's. You think you're so smart, huh, Robert Du Bois? Walking around here like you belong. You don't belong here. You understand? Robert, despite his fear, met Jason's gaze, his eyes filled with a quiet defiance. I have every right to be here, sir. This is a public street. Jason's face contorted with rage. You think you know your rights, huh? Well, let me tell you something, boy. In Cypress Pointe, I am the law. And I say you don't belong here. He shoved Robert against the patrol car, the impact knocking the wind out of him. Jason then began roughly patting him down, his hands lingering a little too long, a little too intimately. Robert, humiliated and terrified, tried to remain still, but Jason's touch felt like a violation. What's this? Jason barked, pulling a small, worn leather wallet from Robert's back pocket. He flipped it open, examining Robert's driver's permit. Robert Du Bois, huh? Born and raised in the 9th Ward. Figures. Well, Mr. Du Bois, I think we need to take you down to the station and ask you a few more questions. Robert's mind raced. The station. He knew what that meant. Intimidation, false accusations, maybe even violence. He had to get out of here. He tried to pull away, but Jason's grip tightened, and Broussard finally stepped forward, his face a mask of conflicted emotions. Ben, I don't think this is necessary. He hasn't done anything, he pleaded. Jason ignored him. Put your hands behind your back, Robert. You're under arrest for loitering and resisting arrest. Resisting arrest? I haven't resisted anything, Robert protested, his voice trembling. You're lying. It's my word against yours, Jason snapped. As Broussard reluctantly put the handcuffs on him, Robert felt a wave of despair wash over him. He was trapped. He looked at Broussard, pleading with his eyes, but the younger officer looked away, his face filled with shame and regret. As the officers led him towards the patrol car, Robert caught a glimpse of a familiar face watching from across the street. It was Mr. Baptiste, his old history teacher, his eyes filled with concern. He had to get word to Lily. She would know what to do. She would know someone who could help. His mind was racing. As they drove towards the station, Robert sat in the back of the patrol car, his hands cuffed behind him, his mind reeling. He thought about Lily Elowen, her weathered face etched with worry. She had always warned him about places like Cypress Pointe, about the prejudices that simmered beneath the surface. The phone rang, startling Jason. He answered, his voice curt. Jason. After a brief pause, his expression hardened. Got it. We're on our way. He hung up and turned to Broussard. Change of plans? We're taking him to the old warehouse on the docks. Broussard frowned. The warehouse? What about processing him at the station? Jason sneered. We got new orders. Just drive. Broussard hesitated, but Jason's glare silenced him. The warehouse. Robert knew the place. Abandoned, isolated, and far from any prying eyes. A shiver ran down his spine. This was getting worse, much worse. He tried to remain calm, to think clearly. He had to find a way out of this. At that moment, Lily Elowen was growing increasingly worried. Robert was never this late. She tried calling his phone, but it went straight to voicemail. A knot of fear tightened in her chest. She knew something was wrong. She reached for her phone, her gnarled fingers trembling as she dialed the number she had never thought she would need to call. The phone rang several times before a deep voice answered. Isaiah Du Bois. Lily Elowen swallowed hard, her voice trembling. Isaiah, baby, it's me, Elowen. Something's happened to Robert. He didn't come home, and I'm scared. Isaiah Dubois, a powerful congressman representing Louisiana's 2nd District, was Robert's uncle, his mother's younger brother. He was a force to be reckoned with, sharp, determined, and fiercely protective of his family. When he heard the fear in Lily Elowen's voice, his blood ran cold. "Tell me everything, Lily," he said, his voice hard. Meanwhile, at the deserted warehouse, Jason and Broussard dragged Robert inside, the air thick with the smell of mildew and decay. "Take a seat," Jason ordered, shoving him into a rickety chair. He and Broussard stood over him, their faces grim. "We know who your uncle is, Robert," Jason said, his voice laced with menace. "We know about Congressman Dubois." Robert's eyes widened. They knew. This wasn't just a random act of harassment. This was something bigger. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "We want you to tell your uncle to back off," Jason said, stepping closer. "He's been making trouble for some powerful people in this town. People who don't like being messed with." Robert stared at Jason, his mind racing. What was Isaiah involved in? What powerful people were they talking about? "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, trying to sound convincing. "I don't know anything about my uncle's work." Jason sneered. "Don't play dumb with me, boy. We know he's been investigating corruption in Cypress Pointe. We know he's been asking questions about Judge Cormier and Councilman Hebert. I swear, I don't know anything," Robert repeated, his voice trembling. Jason sighed and stepped back. "All right, Robert. We can do this the easy way, or we can do this the hard way. It's up to you." He gestured to Broussard, who reluctantly pulled out a heavy, black flashlight. Robert's heart pounded in his chest. He knew what was coming. He closed his eyes, bracing himself for the pain. But then, a voice rang out from the doorway. "What the hell is going on here?" A tall, imposing figure strode into the warehouse, his face a thundercloud. It was Councilman Hebert, one of the most powerful men in Cypress Pointe, his reputation as dark as his tailored suit. Jason and Broussard straightened up, their faces filled with a mixture of fear and respect. "Councilman, we were just, questioning this young man," Jason stammered. Hebert glared at him. "Questioning him? With a flashlight? You think I'm stupid, Jason? I told you to keep things quiet. I didn't tell you to beat the kid half to death." Hebert turned to Robert, his eyes cold and assessing. "You're Isaiah Dubois' nephew, right? Well, let me give you some advice, son. Tell your uncle to mind his own business. Tell him to stop digging where he doesn't belong. Because if he doesn't, things are going to get very ugly. Understand?" Robert met Hebert's gaze, his fears slowly giving way to anger. "I'm not going to tell him anything," he said, his voice defiant. "He's doing what's right. And you can't stop him." Hebert chuckled, a chilling sound that echoed through the warehouse. "You're a brave kid, Robert. But bravery won't get you very far in Cypress Pointe." He turned to Jason and Broussard. "Take him back to where you found him. And make sure he understands the consequences if his uncle doesn't listen." As Jason and Broussard led him back to the patrol car, Robert knew that this was far from over. He had become a pawn in a dangerous game, a game that threatened to consume him and everyone he loved. He saw Lily waving from the porch and wanted to get back to her. He was just on his way back to Lily when 2 black SUVs pulled up the drive in front of Lily's house and agents stepped out from behind the black glass. He knew exactly who they were and why. The next morning, Isaiah Dubois arrived in Cypress Pointe, his face grim, his eyes blazing with righteous fury. He had pulled every string he could, alerted the Justice Department, and put Cypress Pointe under a microscope. He marched into Councilman Hebert's office, his security detail clearing a path before him. Hebert sat behind his desk, his face pale, but trying to maintain a facade of control. "Congressman Dubois, what a surprise," he said, his voice strained. "I was just about to call you." "Save it, Hebert," Isaiah snapped. "I know what you did to my nephew. I know you threatened him. And I know about all the corruption you've been involved in. The bribes, the kickbacks, the illegal land deals. Hebert tried to deny it, but Isaiah cut him off. Don't bother lying. I have proof. Enough to put you away for a very long time. Hebert's face crumbled. What do you want? He asked, his voice barely audible. I want you to confess, Isaiah said. I want you to tell the truth about everything. And I want you to resign from the council. Now. Hebert hesitated, then nodded slowly. All right, he said. I'll do it. But as he reached for the phone, a shot rang out. Hebert slumped forward, a bullet hole in his back. Chaos erupted in the office. Isaiah's security detail drew their weapons, securing the area. Isaiah rushed to Hebert's side, but it was too late. He was gone. As Isaiah knelt beside Hebert's body, he saw a figure fleeing from the building. He recognized him immediately, Jason, his face contorted with rage. Jason had killed Hebert to silence him, to protect the other corrupt officials in Cypress Pointe. Isaiah ordered his security detail to pursue Jason, but the rogue officer had a head start. A high-speed chase ensued through the streets of Cypress Pointe, sirens wailing, chaos spreading. Jason, desperate and cornered, abandoned his car and fled on foot, disappearing into the maze of alleyways and back streets. Isaiah, his face grim, joined the hunt. He wouldn't let Jason escape. He had to be brought to justice. Jason made his way to the old warehouse on the docks, hoping to find refuge. But as he entered, he found himself face to face with Broussard, his expression troubled. Ben, what have you done? Broussard asked, his voice filled with despair. You killed Hebert. You've gone too far. Jason sneered. He was going to rat us all out, Trevor. I had to stop him. Broussard shook his head sadly. This isn't the way, Ben. We're supposed to protect people, not kill them. Jason's hand tightened on his weapon. You're either with me, Trevor, or you're against me. Broussard hesitated, his face a battleground of conflicting emotions. Then, with a sigh, he drew his weapon. I can't do this anymore, Ben, he said. I'm not going to let you kill anyone else. A tense standoff ensued, the two former partners facing each other in the dim light of the warehouse. But before either could make a move, Isaiah burst through the doorway, his weapon drawn. Drop your weapons! He ordered, his voice booming. Jason and Broussard froze, their eyes wide with surprise. They had been caught. Desperation washed over Jason's face. He knew he was finished. He looked over to make sure Lily was safe, but couldn't see her. Jason moved his hand as if reaching for his gun, and Isaiah fired a single shot, striking him down. The aftermath of the shooting sent shockwaves through Cypress Pointe. Jason's death brought an end to the immediate threat, but it also exposed the deep-seated corruption that had plagued the town for years. Broussard, traumatized by the events, agreed to cooperate with the authorities, providing detailed information about the illegal activities of Judge Cormier and other corrupt officials. His testimony led to a series of arrests and indictments, dismantling the criminal network that had controlled Cypress Pointe for decades. The Justice Department launched a full-scale investigation, uncovering evidence of bribery, embezzlement, and abuse of power at every level of government. Judge Cormier, faced with overwhelming evidence against him, resigned from the bench and pleaded guilty to multiple charges. Councilman Hebert's death, though tragic, had a cleansing effect on Cypress Pointe. His confession, recorded before his murder, exposed the truth about the illegal land deals and the exploitation of the town's most vulnerable citizens. Isaiah Dubois, hailed as a hero for his role in exposing the corruption, vowed to continue fighting for justice and accountability. He introduced legislation in Congress to strengthen oversight of local governments and protect whistleblowers who dared to speak out against corruption. The people of Cypress Pointe, freed from the grip of corruption, began the long and difficult process of rebuilding their town. They elected new leaders, reformed their government, and committed themselves to creating a more just and equitable society. Robert, forever changed by his experience, became a symbol of hope and resilience. He spoke at community meetings, sharing his story and inspiring others to stand up against injustice. He used his newfound platform to advocate for the rights of marginalized communities and to demand an end to police brutality. He found strength in the shared stories of survival. One quiet evening, Robert sat on the porch with Lily Elowen, watching the sunset paint the sky with vibrant colors. "You know, baby," Lily Elowen said, her voice soft. "Sometimes it takes a storm to clear the air. What happened to you, it was terrible. But it also brought the truth to light." Robert nodded, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and determination. "We have a lot of work to do, Lily," he said. "But we're going to do it together." As they sat in comfortable silence, Robert thought about the future. He knew that the fight for justice was far from over. But he also knew that he wasn't alone. He had his family, his community, and his unwavering commitment to making a difference. And that was enough. That would have to be enough. Years later, Robert Du Bois stood on the steps of the Louisiana state capitol, his hand resting on the shoulder of a young girl, her eyes filled with hope and determination. He had just been sworn in as the state's youngest ever attorney general. The girl looked up at him, her voice filled with awe. "Are you going to fight the bad guys, Mr. Du Bois?" Robert smiled, his heart filled with a quiet pride. "That's what I'm here to do," he said. "That's what we're all here to do. The fight for justice never ends."